Good morning. This is Dave Wharton. Welcome to the Evergreen Experience 2020 on this Friday, June 26, 2020. The goal of this conversation is to provide real-time insights into the Evergreen leaders' experiences and innovations in this period of crisis, uncertainty, and rapid change. Today, I'm joined with John Grossman, President, Grossman Company Properties, and Robin Petravic, owner and managing director of Heath Ceramics. John and Robin both lead businesses that have been especially hard hit early by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, hotels and dinnerware towel manufacturing, respectively. Having been forced to an almost complete stop in both cases, both Evergreen leaders are now emerging through those uncertain and challenging conditions in their industries and will share their experiences and key learnings as well as their forecasts for the future. With that, let's get started. Good morning, John.
Morning, Dave. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good morning, Robin.
Morning.
Have you guys both here today? Thank you. So, John, I'll start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business, just to set the context for us?
Yeah, you bet. And thank you again for having me today. I really appreciate being included here as a new Tugboat member. It's a really exciting time for me to be sharing my story, and thank you very much. So our business, Grossman Company Properties and Classic Hotels and Resorts, is a second-generation family business. We're a real estate investment and management company with a primary focus in hospitality and ancillary focus in single-family, multifamily, and mixed-use developments. Our geographic focus is Western region only. We have active projects in Carmel, Laguna Beach, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Flagstaff, and Boise. I actually joined the company 10 years ago, and over the last 5 years have transitioned into leadership. Prior to that, I spent about 10 years in two different roles. First, in affordable housing development in the North Bay of San Francisco, and second, in a aged care development capacity down in Sydney, Australia, where I lived for 5 years.
Thanks, John. So, Robin, same question for you, a little bit about yourself and your business.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is an honor to be on this panel here. John used to be my neighbor. I found that out only about 2 years ago. Or I found that out 2 days ago here in Sausalito. In Sausalito, California, North Bay of San Francisco, is where Heath is primarily located. So we're a 72-year-old business. Founded in 1948. We manufacture dinnerware and tile, ceramic dinnerware and tile. And we distribute directly only, primarily through our website, and then 4 brick and mortar showrooms, which are all located in California. So it's ceramic dinnerware and tile, and then high-end home goods from a really select group of vendors. It's a business that my wife and I bought in 2003, and we bought it from the original founders. We in 2003. My wife Kathy and I were both, our background is both in product design and industrial design. And we were looking at Heath as an opportunity to, for 2 reasons really. For us, the importance of craftsmanship in manufacturing here in the U.S., something that was disappearing. And Heath was an example where it was still happening. And to us, it was important for that to continue. And secondly, also for, to maintain the diversity of jobs and those kind of opportunities here in the Bay Area as kind of a counterpoint of what was happening in Silicon Valley. When in 2003, revenue was around 1.2 million with 24 employees, and back in March, it was 30 million with about 220 employees.
Oh, great. Thank you, Robin. That's terrific. So, John, what was kind of the state of the business going into the shutdown, not prior to that shock happening, but where were you guys? How was 2019? How was 2020 looking for you?
What's relevant to our family business is that we are both owners and operators. Our focus is in independent lodging, and we have a kind of a unique platform, as it were. It's a little bit more of an old school type of relationship between the ownership and management aspects of the business. So we have 9 hotels total in our portfolio, about 1,450 rooms all up. There's 7 of those hotels that are independent. So our time and efforts really are focused on the independent side of the business. We have had at the peak just over 1,100 employees. So going into the COVID era, that's where we sat. And I must say, we, like everybody else in our industry, were kind of, I think, starting to hold our breath about how frothy and active and over exuberant the space had been. I mean, we were seeing folks in the bid process for new deals that were not at all involved in hospitality. It became very much a focus, certainly in the coastal markets, of overseas investment. And starting right around 2016, 2017, I felt like we really needed to pump the brakes on our new business focus. So we really did make a concerted decision to pull back almost entirely. We'd look at properties within markets that we already had a footprint, but we were not looking to expand into new markets during that time. And I think what you could say basically across the board was that hospitality reached a crescendo in terms of asset values, cash flows, employment metrics. I mean, across the board, we were experiencing a peak, certainly in my career, but I think a historical peak in general. And I would just say that we were kind of waiting for the first shoe to drop. And if it wasn't, the pandemic, as it were, it would have been something else. We did see an oversupply across the board, some markets more than others, but we were concerned that, for example, in Phoenix, which is the biggest market we operate in, that the supply pipeline was increasing, and that we were expecting a slowdown one way or another in the coming 2 to 3 years as a result. So it really does give you a sense of the extremes that we were basically in, pre-pandemic to effectively within the first couple of weeks of people realizing how bad things were going to be. I mean, it was a peak in a valley, and that's easy to say out loud, but to really feel it was just a remarkable experience. It was something that no one on our team could really find our footing through. It felt like trying to catch a falling knife, and we were basically breathless for about 2 weeks as we saw the market deteriorate in a fashion that was just unprecedented. So it was just I actually had to circle up with my team in preparation for this discussion, and we were basically finding ourselves in a bit of a group therapy session and piecing together the history that had just happened. It was kind of like each one of us couldn't remember the whole picture because it was so intense, and we were filling in gaps for each other, which was quite remarkable given this is only recent history. So
that's amazing. So John, I'd love to come back and continue this in just a moment too, kind of like from that moment of kind of shock, right, of how things turned so quickly for you guys. But Robin, I'll come back to you just for a moment. So it sounded like you had a really nice growth trajectory from the time that you had acquired the business through the end of last year. And from our earlier conversation, it seems like this coming year was going to be a pretty good year too. But of course, it seems like you had a similar situation to John, right? Things came pretty quick and pretty hard, I believe.
I mean, what year is this? 2019 was probably the 16th year in a row of profitability. And, we'd always aim for it. We'd had some big years, some big expansions, a new factory, new showrooms. But we'd always aim for about 5 to 10% growth. And that's kind of what we're hitting again. So we were actually in the middle of the budget planning process for the new fiscal year to start in April. I don't know what happened to that budget. It's crumpled in a waste can at this point. But we were actually looking at a little bit of additional growth. And so we're closer to for us, a lot closer to the 10% mark. So we were actually going to add 1 or 2 new showrooms in this coming year to get that additional 10% of growth. So that's where we were at.
So this external shock happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded like, again, from an earlier conversation, you saw this coming a little bit earlier than even I think the city had seen it. But tell us a little bit about kind of what what happened to you? What was that before you get, and we won't talk yet about how you adapted, but just
Yeah.
what was the initial impact of all of this on the business?
So, we were watching it pretty closely since February, and we could see something coming, and we were actually planning to close voluntarily for about 2 to 3 weeks. And so we made the plan. Could we do it? How will we do it? Could we survive it? How are we going to survive it? So in some ways, that preparation was good. One thing, as soon as we decided that this is pretty likely, we were going to do a voluntary close for a few weeks. Part of the team jumped into overdrive, and they pulled together an online sale, something we never do, kind of out of season and unpredictably, just to generate cash. And that worked out really well. We generated about $500,000. At the time, we realized, okay, we've only got about 1 month's operating cash in the bank, and March is not a high point in our cash season. So, we jumped on that, and then we were about to announce to all of our employees that, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks. And then the city announced it about half an hour beforehand. So we were kind of right in line with that. But we didn't really have, so we had the sale, cash was good. We didn't really see any real softening. But, as soon as the closure happened, factories closed, all the stores closed, only the website, whoever was still shopping at the time, the sale was done, but at that point, revenue dropped by about 80 to 90% overnight. So, and running the business with my wife, is tough, and it's a, we're owners, and this is the time when all of a sudden all those personal guarantees you sign on bank loans really start to become larger than life. And you thought, oh, big deal. I'll just sign this piece of paper and we'll move forward. Try to pull together as much revenue as we can and understand how long we could last from a cash perspective. And then making, the best decisions we could with bad choices. And, the reality of, if we're going to survive, we are going to have to do layoffs. We are going to have to do a lot of furloughs. And we're not going to be the same business when we emerge, when we do get to emerge. So it was pretty drastic. The revenue drop between 80 and 90% didn't last for too long, because we did go into an e-commerce overdrive mode. But we laid off 32%, primarily in factories and retail, but some of the other office jobs. And we furloughed about 48%. So there was a very small team in place to just kind of keep it going as much as we could. And that was a very, very intense couple of weeks. Of course, then, going to, where else could we possibly get cash from? And then finally, grabbing onto the PPP loan program as, the big answer.
Thank you, Robin. I'm going to come back to you a little bit more on this in just a moment. So, John, you were saying basically the floor fell out from underneath you and your management team pretty quickly. And how, I guess, given the businesses you're in, your revenue must have gone down substantially also with the shutdowns all being implemented. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think, speaking to our stance in around 2017, as we saw things get overheated, what we did was spend about 3 years from 2016 to 2019 kind of in anticipation of not knowing, but knowing better than to carry a heavy debt burden. We actually refinanced our entire portfolio over the course of 3 years. And we ended ourselves in a less than 50% loan to value position, which is a great position to be in, certainly in hospitality with the way that cash flows can ebb and flow so drastically. But absolutely, I mean, much like Robin, it was indeed like the floor had fallen out from underneath us. In our business and basically on a national stage, hospitality revenues dropped by 85% or more across the board. So in order to react to that, it was immediate triage, looking at all of our fixed costs and variable costs, and making the very difficult decision very soon in the process to initiate furloughs. We started, I think we had 3 waves all up, and about 2 weeks after kind of kicking off with our COVID action planning, which commenced on Sunday, March 15th with an emergency meeting, at our senior management level, and then continuing for 6 weeks straight, 7 days a week, every single morning in a communication plan to act and react on the information that had been gathered throughout the prior day. Made the decision, like I said early on, to peak out at 960 of 1,100 employees on furlough, which was just, I guess, almost heart-stopping to think of the magnitude that we were having to really contemplate. We did actually position ourselves well enough so that we could continue to pay health care for those employees that were receiving health care through the company at that time. That was paid all the way through April. There was a chunk of time between April and May in which we had to slow the employer portion, but we allowed the employee to continue to contribute. And then when we had PPP kick in late April, early May, kind of on a staggered basis across the portfolio, we're able to re-up again and continue to pay that portion. But, as we stand today, we have brought a number of employees back. We're actually at about 48% pre-COVID levels. So very, very significant still in terms of the reduction in our workforce, but we are now inching our way back up and growing slowly in reaction to the demand that we're seeing in the marketplace.
It's interesting, John, you talked about kind of the debt refinancing piece of this. I have to imagine other people in the industry are really in tough shape. Not that you aren't. I mean, it sounds like you're in a difficult position, but debt looks cheap and free until situations like this arise. And so, one of the things that I think you're highlighting is a lot of evergreen companies. They're very, very conservative about debt. Right. And it's because of multi-generational experiences. Perhaps your father or mother had that experience at one point too, that I think it's really come to serve evergreens well, because, who would have predicted? I think you felt the tension in the market because of the over demand in the prices and all that. But good for you guys for protecting the company into this.
Well, I must say, I would like to, tip my hat to our lending partners. Because across the portfolio, with only a very small exception, we have had long-term relationships, both regional bank balance sheet lenders and also life insurance company lenders. And by putting ourselves in this low loan to leverage position going into this, and being very communicative and responsible borrowers, we were absolutely treated well. We continue to be treated well. We appreciate the relationship very much. And, without them coming to the table and working with us and being very reasonable and understanding of the circumstance we all find ourselves in, we would be in a much more difficult position. So, it's a little bit of luck, but indeed it's a little bit of history involved in being conservative and remaining as best we can in a position to weather, various storms, though none could compare to the one we're in right now.
And just to kind of highlight this, John, and I'll come back to you in just a second, Robin, you had some of your properties where there was hardly a single person in, like the Arizona property, I think 750 rooms roughly, and you had maybe 20 rooms, and your manager, I think, was doing 20 different jobs, right, just to keep the gears moving. So,
yeah. The summary is we actually closed 3 of the 9 hotels. In those very severe times with, the tremendous layoff phase, we had our salaried employees working every job that the hotel needed. And so we have our general manager of our largest asset, which is a 750 room resort, checking people in, hands-on with regards to operations and engineering, literally turning the lights on and off in various buildings to save on marginal fixed costs. Basically it was all hands on deck. And of course, all these people have come up through these various jobs and positions, so it was easy for them to slot back in, but certainly a position that they never expected to find themselves in. And so because we're independent, because we have no requirements from third-party management companies to maintain aspects of levels of service, we're able to be very, very flexible, very aggressive, and very creative as we were managing, the falling sky, as it were.
As a private ownership by your family has proved to be very valuable under this dynamic too, which is great. So Robin, you had a lot of changes in your culture that happened over the last few months. You'd shared with me the other day, from the length of meetings to people stepping up. Could you just perhaps share some of those stories about how you think this has changed your company? And
Sure. I mean, definitely, probably one of the 7 Ps that stands out for us and always has is perseverance. And I think it's how we got to where we are today, and also has seen us through this. So 2 things we focus on: generate as much revenue as possible. And the second thing, come back stronger and leaner and more efficient. With generate as much revenue as possible, we really shifted to an e-commerce focus. What can we actually generate revenue on? And we were able to actually focus on, it was interesting. We had a finite, we were allowed to ship existing inventory only. So we really focused on e-commerce, but we had a dwindling amount of inventory. So you might have an amazing week, but then you're like, well, we just blew through 50% of what we have. There's like an end to it. But our factory and stores have been closed for about a quarter of the year, at this point, which is significant. And that's how we have product to sell. So we focused on revenue with e-commerce, and we're able to crawl back some tile manufacturing, and that's gone better than expected. But the second opportunity that was come back leaner and stronger. So we actually settled into a pretty nice mode of exploring, this chance to really kind of explore what are some of the things that we'd already been talking about bothering us about our culture. We felt like we become a little bit heavy and slow with some things. How can we, we started putting together change charts, right now we work like this, we'd like to work like this. How can we start already moving some of those needles and not waste this opportunity? Our head of people, really struggled with it and suggested that we go to a reduced work week, which is amazing, because if you're making less than $140,000, you're actually doing better than you were before, for a lot of those folks. So 4 days a week, how do you get what you need to get done? So culturally, we started making some real shifts that played into that. And one of the big things, as you mentioned, was going from an hour meeting to a half-hour meeting. So in a half-hour meeting, you just kind of have a lot of pressure to get it done. And, those hour-long meetings kind of, they can drag on. And to put it in context, I did it for myself. So, somebody in my position, most of what I do is meetings, right? So, not everybody's in my boat, but if I added it up and if I took every meeting I did for, from an hour to half an hour, that's a whole day right there. That's already 4 days. So that was one shift that is going to stick around, as we come back. Another one is just kind of around decision making and realizing that sometimes our decision making is a little bit slow because we don't have a clear governance model around who's making the decision. Sometimes it's overly collaborative. So a real kind of shift to recognition around that. And it's something, these are things we're still working on, but we already see them starting to take root in the organization in terms of how we work to make us a leaner, stronger company as we emerge. There's shifts in our business as well that we've looked at. What parts of our business may not be something we want to continue focusing on? Where should we focus? So we've definitely taken the opportunity. If you want me to talk more about it later, I can, but there's a lot of other things that we've looked at very closely, and how do we change and be a stronger company emerging from this.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. And we should talk about that more a little bit later if we could. So I guess last questions for you in this kind of first part of our discussion. And I'll come back to you, John. How are you doing today? How are you feeling compared to, let's say, that late February, early March timeframe?
Well, I would say that I'm feeling empowered by the support that our team has shown for each other. I think that it's just been a really strong coming together. And we have, I think, been there for each other, even over Zoom, as it were, in ways that we hadn't been previously. And I think we're more connected as a senior team. I'm hopeful that the property level teams are more connected. I think that they are, and I think that it's something that is something we'd like to bring forward with us. I think that given that as a backdrop, as a positive comment, I would also probably venture to say that everybody on our team is exhausted. You know, the first 6 weeks of 7-day-a-week morning meetings were necessary, valuable, and just gut-wrenching in terms of how tired we were with the various fires that were needing to be put out on a near constant basis. And so what's been a bit of a luxury now is seeing some of the business levels come back and feeling like, the earth beneath us is again solid, and we are being able to bring our employees back and open up aspects of the properties, and also some of the outlets. Food and beverage is coming back slowly, and we're really feeling great about our California properties, which have proved remarkably resilient. On a positive note, at our 4 hotels in California, 2 in Laguna and 2 in Carmel, we're near sold out this weekend at a very healthy rate, which is something that I could absolutely not have expected nor conceived of, in middle of March, late March, for example. Arizona is also coming back. As you might be aware, it's a downtime in Arizona as the heat continues to climb, and it's just a typical time of year for things to slow down, but we have seen a pretty strong bounce back there as well, certainly with the kickoff over Memorial Day weekend. So seeing those things come back, being able to bring employees back, being able to literally open up wings of our largest asset and reintroduce elements of service while maintaining, the discipline that we had established, and being very careful about not overextending ourselves as we climb out of this hole, as it were. It feels good. I know we're not through it, so it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think that our posture is strong, and I really just appreciate everything that our team's done. It's just been heroic. I just, especially on the finance side, and the information that our team has had to, gather, dissect, analyze, and implement on a near constant basis has just been an order taller than anyone could have imagined.
John, appreciate that. And Robin, how about you? How are you doing today compared to late February, early March, when all this started coming to a head and the floor fell out from underneath you?
It's different. It's a different kind of stress today. I think, when the floor fell out, it was just a lot of stress, a lot of unknown. We can see a way out, but it's threading the needle. But then there's still all those, unseen, right hooks that'll punch you in the mouth at any time. We're still kind of ready for that. A marathon, not a sprint, is actually a buzzword that we've been using here too, John, over the last couple of weeks. I've been saying that. And, I think it's a great analogy, but at the same time, I've been a runner for a while, and I'm not running as quickly as I used to. So, I was introduced to this phrase a couple of years ago about, for I think all of you on this call will probably relate to, but it's called decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is just, as leaders, it can be exhausting in normal times. And the last 3 months have been like 5 years worth of decisions, squeezed into 3 months of some of the hardest you've ever made. So it's, I think, definitely we could use, how do we get a break? And still, because it is still a marathon going forwards.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see John nodding, so I think he's probably agreeing with that. And, it's that the concept of the Stockdale paradox too, right? Which is, very powerful insight that those who set a timeline in their minds for when things had to get better, otherwise they'd be really disappointed. Like, it has to be better by Thanksgiving, or it has to be better by Christmas. Those are the ones who end up with broken hearts, right?
What's interesting about that, Dave, is that I tried this, that resonated with me, and because I listened to that, and I tried it on some people here, and I kept on writing it into my weekly sort of updates, and it kept getting taken out. I think nobody wanted to hear it.
They didn't want to hear it?
I don't think people wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
It's like, it'll get better, we just don't know when. I think people are like, oh, that's too doom and gloom, let's take that out. So
And I think what's challenging right now too is that, even the news this morning, right? Record levels of COVID infections. And I'm sure both of your minds start rolling, right? And you start doing the scenario planning, and then all these things start. So as you said, Robin, that's not a break, right? But you have no control over it. And it is going to be what it is. And you're going to have to be able to roll with it. So
we're better equipped to deal with it is the one thing.
I'm sorry, say that, Robin?
We are better equipped to deal with it.
That's great. John, any final comments on that or anything else before we wrap up this piece?
I mean, I can certainly resonate with decision fatigue. I know my team can as well. And I would just say that with regards to, looking into the future, from the very get-go, we had a kind of a three-prong pro forma approach predicated on different structural requirements that are legislative and also based on what we're seeing with regards to business levels. And we're all aware of these three various kind of guardrails and guidelines for the future. Two of them are very solid and positive, and one of them is one that we are not wanting to have to experience, but it's one that we're prepared for. So, it's sort of like the devil versus the devil you don't. Unfortunately, we know all of the devils, and we're just hoping for the least bad option as we climb out of this.
Right there with you, John. All right. Well, John, Robin, thank you so much for the gift of sharing your experiences during this crisis with us. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been an honor. Thank you.